One of my favorite movie lines, people should know when they're beaten, when they're defeated. Sometimes we have to bring that down to our level in situations we get into and know where to press, where to push, where to retreat, where to back down, and have the wisdom to discern at the times that these pop up in our lives. There's a story from the book of Acts, chapter 5, of the Jews in Jerusalem railing against the church, James and Peter and John, and their efforts to preach the gospel and the works that they were doing. They kept bringing these men before their council, their Jewish council, and forbidding them to preach in the name of Christ. And on one occasion, they were about ready to take a step beyond, probably, and stone, maybe even to the point of death, when a wise man in their midst, Gamaliel, stands up and says, let's put everybody out, let's have a private, closed talk. And the story is in Acts chapter 5 here, where Gamaliel, who was a wise Pharisaic teacher of the law in Jerusalem in the first century, in fact, he was the one who taught the Apostle Paul. But he stands up in this council of the Jews and he relates two other stories that had taken place of men who had risen up in Judea in their period, in their time, and their work and efforts to rally the Jews, throw off the yoke of Rome, came to nothing. And Gamaliel says this. He says, I say to you, keep away from these men. And he's speaking of the apostles. Let them alone. For if this plan or this work is of men, it will come to nothing. Just like a lot of other works of messiahs, so-called messiahs, and other zealot-type leaders had done. It came to nothing. And he said that's the possibility here. And so don't tarnish yourself. Don't bloody your hands here. Verse 39, though, he says, but if it is of God, you cannot overthrow it, lest you even be found to fight against God. And so Gamaliel had the wisdom to stand up and say, it could go both ways, men. This could be nothing but their own work of men, and you're going to just bring shame upon yourself because there is a level of popularity for these men among the people. But he said, even that, if it's of God, you're going to be fighting against God. And that's the story. They agreed with him, and they called for the apostles. They beat them and commanded that they should not speak in the name of Jesus and let them go. Well, you know the rest of the story in Acts. They didn't stop. They continued on. The church continued to grow. These Jewish leaders were blinded by their hatred for what had happened. They were blinded by their guilt for engineering the death of Jesus Christ. There were a lot of currents working there, and they could not even acknowledge the good things that the apostles were doing of healings and the benefit to people of their message, and they could certainly not recognize that Jesus was the Messiah, and they were trying to stamp it out from their blindness and their antagonism toward what was going on. And they were actually fighting blindly. And we know from the story and the fruits that they actually were fighting against God. But to bring it back down to our level, there's a lesson for us to take from Gamaliel. Know when you're beaten. Know when you might be losing. Know when to press your point, even at times when you might be right. Could be what we call a Pyrrhic victory. You're going to lose more than you actually gain, even if you do win. And even sometimes the person, the situation that we might be fighting against, it might be of God. And God's hand might be there. And so the better part of wisdom is to back out and let the fruits show exactly what's taking place. Gamaliel's act of wisdom here comes down to us and has a number of applications in our own life. It's important to remember these stories, act in wisdom and not in anger. That's BT Daily. Join us next time.